Here with Andrew. Thank you so much for your time, for giving me your time. So the first question for you is going to be, as an adult starting Jiu-Jitsu in a late stage on your life, what was the imaginary monster you keep you away from starting BJJ? And what is the feeling being inside this environment and this sort of sport?
I joined Jiu-Jitsu probably only about the last 5 months, but the kids have been training here for the last two and a half years. Didn't really think that we'd step on the mats ourselves, me and some of the dads here, but we always talked about it for probably the last 2 years since we've been here, and got to the point where the kids were progressing and we couldn't help them in competitions and things. So I was kind of in a situation where I think also to be a role model to the kids and show them, that they can also, that we're going through the same thing, because it's hard for them, They come here and then they get beat up by all the kids all the time. And, if they don't see us showing the way and leading by example, I think it's hard for us to ask them to do these things and not do it ourselves.
Amazing. Thank you. So, what was the exact moment when you very first class and you realize, okay, I'm completely immersed in this world, that you say, oh, that could be a good hobby, a good sport to practice?
I think it's the challenge of jiu-jitsu, and I do other sports like golf, and in some ways you're competing not against other people but yourself, and you're trying to unlock things in yourself, whether it's your physical fitness, whether it's your flexibility, for the kids, always trying to get them to come in with a game plan of what they're going to practice and how they're going to do their training. So the same thing kind of applies to me. I think maybe a little bit easier watching for a couple of years, seeing the kids progress. So at least, when I first started rolling, I kind of had an idea of the small things that I wanted to try and achieve each week, just 1 or 2 things that I tried to do to try and implement. Whether that's helped me or not, I don't know. But, it's just, for me, it's been it's going to be a long-term thing for us, I think, and I think as each week I learn something different from a lot of the training partners. Try not to take on board too much and keep it simple, but at the same time I'm also realistic about my age and not trying to do too many crazy things.
Awesome. So next question, what do you think is the biggest misconception that has people that doesn't train Jiu-Jitsu at all until they try it? What is the biggest misconception?
I don't know if it's a misconception, but especially when you're older with kids, you've got responsibilities like work, family, your personal fitness for me has rated high over the last couple of years, because when you have young kids, you kind of let that go for a couple of years, a good 4 or 5 years when the kids are young, they're up late. You don't have time to put into yourself. Now the kids are a little bit older, I have that time to do it and to do it with them, which is always fun. I think one of the misconceptions is that, it can be dangerous, which it can be, but the responsibility as yourself is to always be upfront with the people that you're training with, communicate. If you tap early, there's no reason that you need to put yourself into that sort of situation. So I think sometimes it's not so much that the sport can be dangerous. I think it's a battle of your own ego that you have to try and overcome sometimes, and just let things go.
Cool. Amazing. Thank you. So I'm gonna sit because my feet, you don't mind? So describe the feeling when your first time you tap up someone, the feeling that you say, wow, how powerful, or what was your inside, your feeling, emotionally speaking?
Hard to say, because when you first jump on the mat and everybody's submitting you, there's a part of your ego which is like, I want to do that back to that person. For me, truly, I don't really try and do that too often to people. And a lot of times I get to a point of trying to submit people. I know I've got it, and a lot of the time I let it go, because I don't want to create animosity on the mat with people. Like, I'm not here about that. I'm only here for the kids, and I'm not trying to, there's a lot of young guys here who are very athletic and might take things a little bit more personally. So, there's been a couple of times where I have that, but for me, that's not what I'm here for. I really try and work to the position. When I get to the position and I know that I can feel with the squeeze, then the majority of the times I'll let it go, because I'm not trying to prove anything to myself or to that person. If I know I've got that feeling and I've got the position, then, we can keep rolling. In a lot of ways, kind of submitting, standing back up and then doing it again, it's hard on my cardio.
Thank you. What is your job day, and what do you choose to spend your free time getting smashed on the mats?
So full-time work, I work in IT and in sales, in telecommunications. I've had a lot of hobbies over the years, everything from kind of skiing to motorbike riding. I said golf I played before. Haven't done combat sports since I was little. I did a little bit of judo, but, I think nothing to this sort of degree and duration. So, like I say, it's a different feeling. Like I say, for me, I'm trying to come to the mats, be consistent, and to learn things. So the getting smashed part, I'm okay with. And to be fair, a lot of the senior students here at Journey, they know your situation. They know the competition kids. They know the dads that are just here to try and learn a little bit for their kids. So for the most part, I'd say pretty much everyone has always been fairly gentle. They roll to my pace, or I roll to other people's pace. They're not pulling crazy moves and flying arm bars and things like that. So I think it comes down to the respect of the people that you're wrestling, that you're rolling with as well. So the journey for me has been pretty good, I've got to say. I don't see there being big injuries here unless I do something stupid or overcommit to something.
Thank you. For you, what requires more mental toughness? Like dealing with a toxic client or your boss at work, or escaping for a heavy submission on the mat? What is the biggest?
I think being in professional sales, I have to deal with difficult people all the time, but to me, that kind of is the job. If things were always easy, people would just order things off the internet and we wouldn't have jobs. So to me, that kind of is the easy part of my job because it's an expectation of what I have. Come to Jiu-Jitsu is is completely different to me because I have no expectations. Today I could be rolling with you, tomorrow I could be rolling with the coaches, and the experience of what you're learning is different. I think where they're the same is that, you sometimes in your career, but also in your training, sometimes you can plateau or feel a little bit flat. Yeah. So it comes down to, your mental ability to try and, work out the things that you're doing wrong and then try and implement small things day by day to make yourself, a little bit better today than I was yesterday. I think those things are very similar, but yeah, the challenge of kind of coming in here and getting smashed, I don't know, I don't hate it, I think some people, they do one or two classes and, it's not for them, but I actually don't mind it. I think it's quite fun. Sometimes I'm on the mat giggling with people when I can feel they're reaching in and they're grabbing a collar or, they're trying to wrap a lapel around me. I have a little bit of a giggle because, I just I know what they're working towards and it's like a little challenge in front of me. So yeah, I like the little puzzles that Jiu-Jitsu kind of puts in front of you.
Amazing. So the next one is, by any chance, has anyone at your job ever noticed that you have like a scratch, a bruise, and came with a awkward conversation later? When do you have this scratch on? Because sometimes rolling, you get unfriendly hit or whatever, and could be in your face and your neck. Yeah.
Lucky for me, I haven't had that. I've had a lot of bruises along the arms, along the collars and through the chest. Nothing really visible before. When I finished school, I played a little bit of amateur rugby league, and the guys there would always kind of hit you hard. I'd go to work with black eyes and things like that. But so far in Jiu-Jitsu, I haven't had that. Haven't had scratches or any bruises like that. But yeah, some of my co-workers know that the kids compete. But yeah, no. Besides that, we don't really talk too much about Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay, very good. How has fighting out of a bad position on the mats changed how you handle high stress situation at work? Is any relation between both environments?
I'd say there is, and for me, when I first started training, I always went for that submissive position, trying to pull guard on people and get into these positions because, for me, naturally, my weight is, I'm 100 kilos normal, and a lot of the people that we wrestle with, are smaller, and I didn't want to use my weight to my advantage. So, and a lot of times I would let them, go into mount or go into side, and then I'll try and work my way out of it. Only because I thought there's no point in me just lying on top of them and then, doing the top game. I'm not learning anything, they're not learning anything. And, so where I apply that into my day job is that sometimes, there was a saying a couple of years ago, and they say, learn to love what you hate, and sometimes that's what you uncover in terms of not only in your training, but also in your career. In my career, I've had certain weaknesses, whether it's administration or doing certain things. And in a way, I have to retrain myself to start to love those things so that I can grow as a professional. And I think jiu-jitsu is very similar to that. If I just sit there and do the same old moves day in and day out, and I don't challenge myself in those weaker positions, the ability for me to actually to grow and to become better will slow down considerably. That's how I feel.
Amazing. Thank you. How long have you been training?
5 months? 4 months?
5 months. Okay. So,
Rest those months.
if you could go back of your first week of training and give yourself an advice to protect your body, what will be?
I kind of did this anyway. I went, even to this day, I still go very easy. A lot of the senior guys say, you're not using your weight. I try and be very polite, in a way when I wrestle. And a lot of people say, well, you kind of need to, start getting a little bit more aggressive, put a bit more weight down, make them feel uncomfortable. So I did kind of, start to plateau off a bit, where I really found it difficult to, especially the senior guys, to break their guard. They always had a foot or a leg inside, a butterfly inside my ankle. And I just found it really difficult to pass them. I was always in submissive positions with these big guys on my back, and you kind of flattens you out a little bit. And then I was talking to the guys, and one of them said, you just got to be a little bit more forceful with what you're doing. So when I think about going back to that first week, it's not that I would do it differently. I think you need to kind of get used to the sport. Any new person who comes to the mats not going to be, well, I hope they're not going to be just going full throttle, elbows into the neck, and I always think that's the worst way to introduce yourself into a sport, because you're not showing respect to your fellow teammates. And it's just, I would just say the advice I'd say is just, go slow, go easy. Ask advice from each person that you roll with. And if it's just one thing, don't try and take too much information on board.
Thank you. Is there any specific move or guard you completely banned from your game just to save your health or your joints?
I think at this level that people don't tend to do, any of the heel hooks, the knee and the wrist locks. I'm completely not interested in any of that at this stage. Not interested in competing. It's, for me, the longevity is, to learn the sport, to understand it, to help the kids. It's the kids' time, not my time. If I'm still training at that time and that comes into it, so be it. But yeah,
We hope so.
Yeah, it's just, I feel like at this stage of my age, career and everything, that's probably a few years away.
For you personally, what is the tougher opponent? Like we spoke before, a 20 years old wrestler, or your body next morning after a hard session?
Well, I'd say the young 20-year-old, the Wildcats, trying to hold these guys down. You get them at least once a session, and it's just a mixed bag. I see them, and sometimes the professors pair me with them, and I'm like, oh my god, and it's like holding like a Wildcat sometimes. But the soreness, I think, is kind of part of it. Like, luckily, before I started jiu-jitsu, I was working out of the gym a little bit, so I hadn't done any physical activity for a long time. I think for about 1.5 years, 2 years before we started jiu-jitsu, I was training with one of the other dads. And I always think, at this stage, I'm glad I did that before starting jiu-jitsu, because my physical activity, had I started where I was 2 years prior to that, would have been terrible. Like, the cardio wouldn't have been there. I was getting a lot of aches and pains and creaks. So actually, the bounce back's actually not too bad. I do feel a little bit tired and sore in the evening, but the next day I'm actually pretty good. So Yeah, that's what I say. That really came down to kind of the work in the gym previously.
Amazing. Thank you, man. If you only had 2-3 hours per week to train, what 20% of BJJ will you focus to get you 80% of your results?
So it's a really good question. Like even a few months in, I feel like I'm not even touching the tip of the iceberg. And every time I roll with, one of the senior students or with the professors, I really listen to those one or two things that they say that I'm doing incorrectly. And sometimes, especially with Coach Diego, they're very, very small things, an arm here, an elbow there, it's isolating, or controlling. And sometimes I sit there and I think about that makes so much sense. But if you don't know, and that's kind of where I'm at the moment, it's like this ocean of things that I don't know. And so I might be, a cross face or, trying to mount, but then I'm losing position or I'm, overreaching, showing my back. But I don't realize that because it's only new to me. So I think the challenge that I have at the moment is like not trying to get too ahead of myself and wanting to rush things through it, but allowing myself to take the time and to, to incorporate things little by little. I can see why the journey for people to move through their belts takes a very long time in Jiu-Jitsu because there's so many things to learn and, it's very much about the flow and the counter. And until you're kind of on the mat rolling and feeling it, it's hard to describe it to somebody. Does that make sense?
Thank you. So next one is, let's say when your coach shows you like a really complex movement, like 5 different steps, what is your mental process to digest and to remember?
Cool. I think sometimes the really complex moves I struggle with, and I think sometimes it's just trying to break down each part of it one by one. We've spent the last 4 or 5 weeks starting in X-guard. And, for an old guy like me, kind of reaching up and legs in between and controlling people on top of you, it's been a bit of a challenge. If we were starting kind of from side control, that'd be more my flavor. But, the X-guard has been something which it's not that I love it, but I've kind of had to learn to do because we've been doing it week after week after week. But, sometimes we do different transitions. I'm just trying to break down the first part, the second part, the third part. Hopefully by the end, I can kind of do at least 3 or 4 of the transitions. But I do find kind of the longer transitions quite difficult.
Thank you. In your personal opinion, what do you think is the single biggest mistake a white belt makes through their journey that completely stunts the process?
Probably going to say it's impatience. You come to the mat week after week, 3-4 times a week, and you're getting smashed for 6 months. And if you it was an expectation that I was prepared for because I saw the kids go through it. Mm-hmm. And, I saw them come up on day one and, they get, kids half their size, take their back and choke them out. And, so I didn't have an expectation of coming here. Like I say, I think that probably the biggest mistake is that, you come with your ego and you think, I'm an adult, I watch UFC, I know how to take someone's back, I know how to do this. But I think the best mindset to come in here is just a clean slate. I don't know anything and I'm going to train with, everybody and try and absorb as much as I can. I think if you come in with that mind frame, you're more likely to stick it out than if you're trying to rush yourself, be impatient, rushing to try and submit somebody. For me, the goal is never submitting anybody. Like I said, it's more about learning the positions and the techniques. If you can get to that position, I'm guessing the submissions will come, but it's still early days for me.
Last question, and we're finished. You need to finish the sentence. So, for the viewer that might be seeing, if you are like 30 plus year adult, trying to start BJJ, sitting on your couch comfortably, and you are terrified to walk in the gym, a BJJ gym, you need to know that you finish the sentence.
I think a lot of the times people who have trained, especially in BJJ, say that they wish they started earlier. And in a lot of ways, I knew that coming into it, but I still, even now joining, I do wish that I did start earlier. You know, I think that, you know, I would have had more flexibility, I would have had more strength, I would have had more stamina. But I guess the flip side to that is that it's never too late to start. So I guess the recommendation for people is, you know, give it a try. Fight within your own means, communicate with all your training partners, you know, pick a good gym and yeah, go from there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you so much. Thank you.